Hello, you're very welcome to another episode here of the League of Ireland podcast on FinalWhistle.ie. I'm Kieran Cannon. Here's what we have coming up this evening. Oisin Moran from Sligo Rovers will be on to us talking about his documentary, recounting that famous 2012 League of Ireland Championship win. We'll also be talking to Harlain Mbayo of Cobh Ramblers about his switch from Aberdeen down to the south of Ireland. And finally, on the last segment of the programme, we will have Niall Newberry of the Dundalk Democrat, who will be discussing all things League of Ireland, both in the Premier Division and in the First Division. But taking us in as our first guest, here's Oisin Moran.
How you doing, Kieran? How are you keeping?
How you doing, Oisin? It doesn't seem like 10 years ago that we had the famous League of Ireland title win for Sligo Rovers. You've made a documentary in relation to it. What was the thought process behind that, first of all?
Well, the thought process was, I'd done a previous documentary I was on before with it's called Shine, and we left that as the 1994 Cup final where Gavin Dykes lifted the cup. And it kind of left space there to deal with what's known in Sligo as the kind of golden years, the golden era. And Shine got a very good reception of Rovers fans and League of Ireland fans in general. So we were kind of looking at doing something to kind of celebrate the golden era. And then this year marks the 10-year anniversary, as you were saying yourself, and that's flown around. And the concept was to tell the story of the years of success, but without being, in a kind of a gloaty fashion or a kind of a, we won the cup in 10, 11, League 12, 13, Cup in 13. It was to kind of find some drama in that. So what we kind of settled on was the day we were playing Pats to win the league in the showgrounds, and now a win guaranteed us the first League of Ireland trophy in the showgrounds in 35 years. So there's a bit of drama in that. It was a cracking game. RT were down with the cameras. They'd put in temporary stands behind the goal, so it was all enclosed, and there was a great atmosphere. Like I live in Dublin, and I came up on the train with a lot of the Pats fans and stuff, and they were in Connolly Station, and the drums and the noise, and they were up for it. And had they won that, we had to play Shams, and we had to play Drogheda, who were good at the time, and there was a good chance, there's a reasonable chance that we could have blown it that day as well, and that was in the minds of a few Rovers fans as well. So we built it around that day, and then kind of told the story of the surroundings from that day, if it makes sense.
The one thing that I did notice from watching the documentary is, it could have been very heavily focused on the management and the player side of things, but you brought the people, you brought the fans, and the people in the background that might not necessarily, we all know that the players get an awful lot of the credit, but it's about the supporters, it's about the community, it's about the town, and I think you captivated that an awful lot in terms of the documentary. So that must have been a very important aspect, and Sligo does have that community ethos, so it was very important to demonstrate and to showcase that as well.
Yeah, it was important for us. Oh, I went there for a second. It was important for us to show off the community and the fans behind it as well. Like, we wanted to kind of broaden it out. Like, I presume Dundalk at the same thing, but there's kind of a Forza supporters group that do a lot of colour, do a lot of flares, do a lot of flags and stuff. And over the years, they've done some great stuff. So I wanted to show them, like the kids that came in, a lot of that works for yourselves. She was a Super Red, so that was the kind of junior supporters club at the time. So wanted to get somebody that was at the match as a kid, then some of the older supporters, and obviously talking to the likes of Raf and Alan Keane and Quigley and Ando as well, but kind of show it from different perspectives, show off the club as well, and show off the town.
The one thing that I did notice about, from listening to the players, and like Liam Buckley, even though he's the Sligo manager now, he was given it from the the opposition perspective of things. Like he's beaten them in a cup final, he's beaten Sligo in a cup final, he's then the opposition manager in terms of the game against St. Pat's. You couldn't have written that even better now that he's the manager of Sligo.
No, it worked out very well, and Liam is a very interesting person to talk to. He's been around the league for a long time, an absolute gentleman to talk to,
Yeah.
and he's one of those few League of Ireland players that went off and played on the continent. Like, and we spoke to him about that and how it influenced what he wanted to bring to management in his career. And he was the manager for Sporting Fingal in 2009, and he, you know, we went into that assuming that we'd win. I was one of those fans assuming that we'd win in Tala, and then he was back again with Pats, and that Pats team were brilliant. Like, that Pats team had some really good players, like Christy Fagan and sorry, it's completely, it's just going
to Christy Fagan. You've got Christy Fagan. You had, Ian Birmingham, Chris Forrester. They were a very talented group.
Yeah, there's some great players in there, and well able to play football. And that's what part of the drama of the doc was, is that we weren't playing somebody we were going to steamroll. These guys were coming with a mission to win, and they had to win that day to catch us in the league. Like, coming up and getting a draw wasn't any use to them. Coming up and getting a win was what they needed to do, and they did from the outset. They had a player on the wing, O'Connor. He hit the bar twice. The brilliant team. And Pats are a club that I'd always associate with good football, even from the mid-90s and that. Like, they had some really good teams, especially under Brian Kerr and that. Like, great memories of them playing.
Just so we don't want to give too much away, because obviously we want people to go and watch it. Where, first of all, can League of Ireland fans, and I think League of Ireland fans should go and watch this, because it will draw the heartstrings, so to speak. So where can they go and watch it?
It's on Sligo Rovers YouTube channel, so it's accessible and it's free to everybody. And that was the idea, to put it onto YouTube, so everybody can freely share it, watch it on your phone. There's no restrictions. Like, a journalist asked me why weren't we charging money to watch it. We'd raise a few quid for the club. I says, well, not really the point. I think the point is to kind of promote the club, give people that attachment, that kind of trip down memory lane for a lot of people. And you know what? If it helps promote the league and shows off the league in a really good light, then that's brilliant. And the more eyes we can get onto it, like, the better. Like, we just want people to share it and view it, and YouTube was the easiest platform to deliver that on for us.
Well, listen, Oisin, thank you very, very much for joining us this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure. The best of luck with the documentary. I'm sure, hopefully, that Sligo will be able to produce another one in the not too distant future. But we're going to take you out by showing a clip from the documentary now, which you were very kindly to show us. And it just captivates that day and the beginning of that day and everything about it. So, Oisin, thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Kieran. Thank you very much for having me on.
It was fitting that Raf done it that day. He lived all our dreams that day. That's any Rovers fan just thinks about that moment where they win the league for Sligo Rovers. And Raf lived it, and he couldn't have done it in any better way. And I couldn't think of a better person to have done it either.
Being, I suppose, around age 10 in primary school, in the build-up to the game, the excitement was immense. A lot of us were actually going to the game with those big interests in our class in Sligo Rovers, and a lot of us were part of the Super Red, so we were anticipating the game highly.
The build-up for the game against Pats was the buzz around the town, seeing the temporary stand going in, and everyone scrambling to get tickets, knowing that if we win this at home, this is the title.
They're the sort of things you do dream of as a child. You put the ball down, or FA Cups, and couldn't win the league, and you scored a penalty or scored a goal in the last minute. So I'm there saying to myself, right, this is your moment to actually do something and leave a mark and a bit of history. So that was, I was really calm. I knew I was going to score. I really knew. I didn't doubt myself for 1 second.
And that was the document. Our next And that was the documentary. So I want to wish Oisin and everybody at Sligo Rovers the very, very best of luck. Our next guest coming up is from Cobh Ramblers, and this is Harlain Mbayo, who spoke to us earlier on today. Our next guest on the podcast this week is from Cobh Ramblers. I'm delighted to be joined by Harlain Mbayo. Harlain, you're very welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much. How are you today?
I'm great. It's great to talk to you. Harlain, first of all, if we can just talk about last week's match against Cork City. I'm not too sure if you were aware of the big derby that usually happens between Cork and Cobh. Your thoughts on it as a match overall?
First off, I think everyone there, and even if you weren't there, you would have seen that it was a really close game. But obviously the atmosphere, that's what the first thing that got me, because it was my first one at Commons Park. But the atmosphere was, I know there was a few flares and stuff here and there, but it was a really good atmosphere and even a good turnout from Cobh and the Cork fans. But I just think, just to summarise it quickly, I just think we were really unlucky not to get anything from that game. Don't get me wrong, Cork are a really good and well-organised team, but I just feel like they were there for the taking, and credit to all the boys, because obviously I was suspended, but everyone on that pitch that played worked their socks off, and you know what I mean? It's little things that maybe didn't go our way. We had 2 cleared off the line, 1 that hit off the bar. And you know what I mean? On another day, they go in and we get something, if not the win. But it was a really good game. And I think from that performance, I think we've basically just set a standard for how we're going to go for the rest of the season and how we should attack every single game of the season, to be honest.
Without putting too much on it, like your position in the table, I think it's kind of flattering to deceive a little bit. I think all in all, you guys as a group, I know speaking to Darren earlier on this year, you probably as a group, you probably think you're better than where you are in the table, and the only way is up.
No, 100%, because there's no getting away from it. We're second from bottom, but anyone that's even you don't even have to see the matches. If you read the reports of all the games that we played and the teams that we played, I think you can't get away from stuff like, obviously it's up to us to add the finishing touches and be more positive in the opposition's box and to defend better. But even then, if you take away from the first game against Bray, the opening game of the season where we're 2-0 up, whatever happens, and we get a sending off, and then we lose that game 3-2. We're all on top of Bray in that first game against them, and then they score a worldie from 35 yards out. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Going up to Galway, defending really well for all the game, and then they get a set piece. Do you know what I mean? It's little, it's not the good thing about our performances is I under the gaffer, there's only probably 1 game, and I think there's 1 or 2 games that we didn't turn up, but except from that, the work rate's been good and the style of play has been good, and we know we can compete with anyone. That's why that result wasn't too disheartening against Cork, because after that game, we know we can compete with anyone in this league, and obviously the table is where it's at because it's a reflection of what you get from the matches, but we know we're a lot better than what we've been putting out. So to be fair, it's all positive as we go into the second round of games.
Harlain, talk to me about the move to Cobh, because you signed from Aberdeen, an SPL side. What enticed you, first of all, to come to Ireland, but secondly, to move to Cobh? Because as we were speaking off air, it's an amazing town. It's rich in history and culture. But what was it about Darren, the club, and the surrounding areas that enticed you to move away?
To be honest, it's obviously a really special year for the club as well. And then at the time that I'm coming, I was coming on the back of January, which is also, I knew in terms of playing wise, I knew I wanted to go into a league where I wouldn't be going halfway through the season. Does that make sense? And
Yes, I do.
And obviously there's other teams in Ireland and stuff like that. But when Cork came about, for me, it was just my relationship with the manager and everyone. It wasn't just the manager. It's easy to say I had a good chat with the manager and it was good and also, but it was literally every single person at the club from the minute I stepped in. And And then after I trained the first day, I remember I spoke to my brother and I said, like, this could actually be all right, because I didn't feel like I was new or per se. Do you know what I mean? Like, we had players like Jason Abbott and Brendan. Like, I feel like I've known them my whole life. Do you know what I mean? And played with them. Like, even playing with Brendan or Ben and stuff like that, it just seemed a bit natural. So when I spoke to my agent and the manager, and obviously the manager was a big one, because I like his honesty and how honest he is, and I have targets which I want to reach, and he's made it very clear that he's there to help me reach my targets, but I've got to put in the work to do you know what I mean? So it was one of those things where I feel like it was the perfect time, because in Ireland obviously they started their season and the pre-season around the same time. The perfect club, because as soon as I came, I had a good feeling about club, and then it's a special year for the club, and I want to do well for the club as well. Do you know what I mean? It's easy coming to somewhere and just trying to play football, but I want to do well for the club. Do you know what I mean? I've got some expectations of my own, but for the club in itself, I want us to do well and reach our goal. And do you know what I mean? Like I said, all the staff and the chairman was really good. The manager was really good. And then all the other coaches within the club, whether it's the defensive one, the midfield, there's a lot going on at the club, which is really exciting and really good. And it's a community-based club. And like I said, even away from the club, everyone's been really nice and supportive. So I don't have anything to complain about. So I just knew it'd be a good fit, and all I want to do now is just repay all of that with results on the pitch.
You've made your international. You've broken into the international playing for the Democratic Republic of Congo. You know, the African Cup of Nations just been on. I think it's getting more media coverage now because of the exposure of the big players. But coming from your experience, do you think that obviously playing for an African nation is something that I'm trying to put it in the nice way? Like, is the quality of football really as strong as it is in Europe? And do you think that playing for an international side like that is going to benefit you playing for Cobh? Probably two parts of a question there.
I know.
Yeah.
So obviously you can't get away from it. Like, obviously there's good players everywhere, but I feel like the quality over with the European teams compared to some of the African teams is always going to be higher, because you get a higher. Do you know what I mean? The facilities are better. The standard of coaching is better and stuff like that. So you'll naturally get like better groomed players. But for me, the second part of the question is how will it help me in Cobh? Well, to be honest, I had this conversation today with my brother, because obviously the national team they've just elected a new manager in today, and then my agent gave me a call because I was in contact with the last one. But for me, it's just about developing and being as best as I can, and if I get the opportunity again, which has, do you know what I mean, which was spoken about already between them and my agent, I just continue to do well, whether it's Cobh, whether it was at Aberdeen, whether it's, do you know what I mean, whether it's in the park. Like, if I'm being asked to play centre away or do something, I'm going to make sure I do it to the best of my ability, because like I said, representing your country is, I think for me, is the highest honour in football, and that's the only thing. And obviously the next African Cup of Nations is in 2022. So the qualifiers for it is at the end of this summer. So obviously that's something I've been having in the back of my head, and I spoke to my agent as well, and he, like, I know I know there's players at other clubs and stuff like that, but I know, like, it's down to me, because right now I'm at Cobh, and to be fair to the other officials and stuff like that, when I spoke to them, they told me it doesn't matter where you are, it's about how you're performing. And that's why I don't see being at Cobh as no disrespect to, like as a lesser club to them, any of the other players. It's just almost like it's just a path to where I need to get to, and if I'm doing well here, then they're still watching my games, and then they'll still appreciate it. But no, I think to answer the question, like, it can only benefit me playing for Cobh. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Finally, like the first division this year, I'm not too sure if you knew about it before that. Like it was for a couple of years, there was just one standout team that would go get promoted. This year, you've got Waterford, who have just recently let go of their manager. You've got Cork, obviously, who you played last week. You've got Galway United. You've got Longford, Wexford, yourselves. Like it's the most competitive first division that you could have come into. From your experience of playing against the sides, the quality of football's been very good. But were you surprised by it, or is it something that you knew you were going into?
To be honest, I wouldn't say I was surprised, or because as a defender and just the way I am, I just knew like a few of the certain things. I just knew because, okay, we might not be able to play pretty football, so I knew as a defender coming into this league and stuff like that, or any league, the stuff which I'm going to have to do is a given. Like I'm going to have to be vocal, I'm going to have to be physical, I'm going to have to win my headers. But saying that as well, like I've been surprised with some with how some of the teams have, well, most of the teams have to play. I think bar Galway, I think everyone's really tried to play football and try to cut through us and stuff like that. Galway were a bit, don't get me wrong, Galway were a good side, but I felt like they were more direct, and that kind of suited us because as a back four and as a defence, I think we've almost got to get to a point when we're in games like that where you've got to enjoy defending, win your headers, squeezing line up. It's tiring, but you've got to do them stuff. And no, the standards actually, like I said, the standards kind of not shocked me, but the fact that there isn't a massive
gulf in class,
points,
so to speak.
Yeah. I know points don't really reflect stuff as they are, but like you could go there if anyone was to say, oh, I know it's a derby and there's more in it, but do you know what I mean? What was it? I think it was Cork that drew with Bray, and then we went over, and then Cork come here, and then we've got a good chance to play them, and then they win 3-2, obviously. But do you know what I mean? It's almost that type of league where anyone can be anyone on their day. So it's just about who's more concentrated. But it's a really good. Do you know what I mean? It's a good league to be in, and there's loads of great teams in it. That's the main thing, and it's more exciting as a player because you just know you can't go in half-hearted into it. You shouldn't go in half-hearted into any game, but you just know every game is going to be a challenge, which is I like that. It's exciting. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Listen, final question. You're playing Bray this weekend. It's into the second series of games. You kind of have a feel of what these teams are like. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, because obviously I was suspended the last game. I missed the Cork City game. Well, whether I'm in the team or I'm not starting 11, I think for us it's just start the game the same way we ended that Cork City game, and the same way that we were throughout that whole game. That's how we've got to be it for the rest of, no matter who it's against, or do you know what I mean, what the pitch, what the conditions are. We have to play the same sort of intensity, and I think if we play with the same intensity we played against Cork, there will beat anyone. It doesn't matter whether it's Cork or Bray or Galway, but that's the main thing for us, to keep our discipline and also to actually, do you know what I mean, put some teams under pressure, because that's what we've lacked. I think we've made it too easy at times for teams to come here, or we go there and we almost take 20, 30 minutes to get into a game, or we wait to concede to go into a game. But I think against Bray and I think there's the best thing about the group of players that we have just now is everything's still kind of positive. Do you know what I mean? We know where we are in the table, but it's not disheartening, and no one's really got their heads down. Everyone wants to kick on. So I just think the plan for Bray is just do what we've been doing with more intensity, and I think we'll be all right.
Listen, Harlain, thanks very much for speaking to us today. We wish you the best of luck, and hopefully we'll get talking to you maybe towards the end of the season.
Thank you.
Our next guest from the Dundalk Democrat, and he's here to talk to us about the League of Ireland in general. I'm delighted to be joined by Niall Newberry. Niall, you're very welcome to the programme.
How are you, Kieran? You keeping well?
I'm keeping great. It's good to see you again. Now, we're just going to go through the fixtures, first of all, and the results and a general chat about the league. So starting with the results of what happened last week. Once again, an action-packed weekend in the League of Ireland. I know yourself and myself were in Oriel Park. So, but if we can just go through the results of what happened last week, starting in the Premier Division. And that was Shamrock Rovers had a comprehensive victory over Bohemians. They won 3-1. Derry City, another comprehensive victory, 7-1 against UCD, while Dundalk were victorious over Shelbourne. They left it late, and St Patrick Athletic bet Finn Harps 2-0. Shamrock Rovers were kind of very slow to get started this season, but we'll dwell into that in just a couple of minutes. But Niall, Dublin derbies are very unpredictable at the best of times, but that's a good win for Shamrock Rovers in Dalymount Park.
It certainly is, Kieran. Yeah, Shamrock Rovers, we can, they haven't been, wowing people, I suppose, throughout the season so far. But I suppose that's what it was kind of the same story last year and even the year before when they walked away with the league title. So I think, a Dublin derby against Bohemians, is always going to be, especially in Dalymount, as you said, is always going to, be a tough fixture for Shamrock Rovers. And, I think, I haven't been impressed with Bohs this season, to be fair. And, it's been a very tough sort of period for them at the minute. And, they haven't had, you can't lose the players Bohs have lost. Georgie Kelly, Keith Buckley, Ross Tierney, the list kind of goes on, like, you know what I mean? And, I think Keith Long is maybe for the first time maybe starting to really feel the effects of that turnover in the squad this season, where you just can't keep rebuilding every single season. And, it's just, it wasn't a major surprise that Rovers came out of that one with a comfortable 2-goal win or 2-goal lead to win 3-1 in Dalymount. And, Andy Lyons, the ex-Bohs player, getting on the score sheet, wouldn't have gone down too well with the Bohs faithful leader, like, you know what I mean? But he's had a remarkable beginning to his Rovers career. Andy Lyons, he's been absolutely amazing, and he's been among the goals and the assists this season, and he's been a vital cog in Rovers' resilience, because a few weeks ago, it's kind of all changed, and Rovers have gone from being, I think it was 7 points or 6 points to just being the 1 point now, behind Derry City at the top after 12 matches. So it's really hotting up at the top of the league.
Derry City defeated UCD 7-1. It's a statement of intent from them that they're not out of this race, but they've had a bit of a sticky patch. Was this the kind of reaction that they would have been looking for, that Rory Higgins in particular would have been looking for from his squad? We spoke to Patrick McElhenney on the show last week, and he said, the fact that even the likes of the loss of Mickey Duffy, who hasn't really played, he hasn't effectively played for Derry City. They haven't played what he believes their strongest 11, but yet they're still top of the pile. Is there still more to come from this Derry City side, do you think?
I think there is, yeah, Kieran. I do think there is. I do think they are their starting 11 is unbelievable. The only worry I'd have for Derry, like as you said, obviously Michael Duffy's already picked up a bad injury. Kieran Harkin is going to be out for a good while as well, by the looks of it. So they are a bit light in terms of squad depth in comparison to, say, Rovers, who Rovers can have the likes of Towell or Gannon on the bench any given week. You know what I mean? And Rowan Finn, even at his age, is still an exceptionally good player. Rovers have a massive squad and great squad depth. I just feel Derry are sort of lacking that, and with Harkin and Duffy already injured, you feel they're only another injury or two away from a disaster. Hopefully for them that doesn't happen. I think at the minute, things are ticking along nicely for them. Obviously they had 2 bad results, which has let Rovers kind of back into the race. But that was I think, as I said, Kieran, an amazing response against UCD. I think it was 5-0 at half time. In that one, so Jamie McGonigal, who's gone a few games without a goal now, suddenly pops up with a hat trick. Will Patching back among the goals. He's been immense since coming back to Derry in the off season from Dundalk. And I know I said at the start of the season, I had a feeling this could be Derry's year, and I think if they can avoid any more injuries, I really do believe that they could go all the way, because I don't think the Shamrock Rovers team over the last 2 seasons have been challenged, properly. I know Sligo were challenging them for a time last season, but they obviously fell away. St Pat's couldn't get a run of games together where they could seriously go on a title race. The year before, obviously, Dundalk, had a bit of a rocky, well, we're kind of in free fall, I suppose, over the last 2 seasons, and sort of self-destructed. So you feel like this Derry team is probably the first time this Rovers team anyway, has been, or is going to be properly challenged for a league title. And I think Derry's definitely up for the fight. And I think, in Rory Higgins, they've got an exceptionally good manager and a good coach. And, nobody who you speak to in football has a negative thing to say about Rory Higgins' ability as a coach and his knowledge of the game. And I think, he's somebody who could definitely bring the good times back to Derry, and they've got the financial backing as well. A bit like Rovers, obviously, also. But, if they can keep injury-free and if Jane McGonigal and Will Patching can continue in the vein of form that they've been on, then, and obviously, I've got to give mention to Cameron McJannet at the back as well, has been superb for them also. And for the last number of seasons, McJanet's been a really, really good player for Derry. And this season, he's kind of coming of age properly, because people are really starting to see now in a sort of better Derry team how good a player he actually is, not only defensively, but also, he's chipped in with a good few assists and he's got a couple of goals. So, I think Derry, have a real chance of winning the league. And that's exactly what Rory Higgins would have wanted on Friday night. It doesn't get much better than putting 7 goals past anyone. And albeit UCD, bottom at the foot of the table, but you can only play what's put in front of you, to use that old cliche. And they did that. And the only downside is they're probably disappointed that they can't keep the clean sheet. And get to 7-0, but 7-1 certainly nothing to be snuffed at.
Nothing to be sniffed at.
Yeah.
We'll go on to our old hunt. Dundalk left it late with a goal from John Martin to win it. I'm not sure if you saw it from your side of the stand, but when Hoban was taken off and John Martin was brought on, there was a collective shout of, "What's he doing?" And then all of a sudden Martin scores the winner, and he's all of a sudden a tactical genius. But if we get back to the game itself, it was an absolute bore fest up until the 45th minute. Then all of a sudden exploded into life when Damien Duff was sent off. But if we were to look at both sides kind of individually, Dundalk seem to be the kind of the thing of, you score 4, we score 5, whereas Shelbourne are not playing very well in Tuggle Park, but getting big results away from home. They're a real Jekyll and Hyde side.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and the game kind of reflected that, I think. On Friday, Shelbourne obviously came to Oriel with a game plan, and that game plan was basically to not play football, I suppose, in one respect, But yeah, as you just said yourself, Kieran, the first 40 minutes or so were just, it was some of the worst football I've seen at Oriel Park. And I remember saying to Barry Landy in the press tribune, who was just beside me, I just said to him that this is the worst 40 odd minutes I've ever seen in my life. And then suddenly, Griffin, and he thought I was a bit harsh now, in fairness, and maybe, I don't know, I still stand by the comment, but then 40 odd minutes, then suddenly Shane Griffin gets the second yellow, Damien Duff gets a red card as a consequence of his protestations, and suddenly it all kicks into life. Then in the second half, after that, it kind of give everybody a lift. And I still don't think it wasn't by any means a vintage Dundalk performance by any stretch of the imagination, but they got the lead goal. Paul Doyle, and I know you mentioned, the crowd in the stand, were giving, certain players stick. Paul Doyle was getting a lot of stick from the main stand in Oriel moments before he puts the ball in for Dan Kelly, and he just, comes in at the front post with a lovely little side foot finish, a little deft finish to make it 1-0. But then suddenly, the Dundalk, you were kind of hoping the Dundalk would kind of, push on from there. And it was only after Bradley got sent off, when it went 10v10, the game kind of, the Dundalk started to play better, which, so sometimes that kind of happens in football, I suppose. But, I'm not sure how much sense that makes. But the Dundalk seemed to play better once Bradley had got sent off and it was 10v10 again. And but then, the penalty decision, where Kelly was the judge to have fouled Farrell. Farrell took the penalty, but I just think it was very, very soft. It was a very soft penalty. I think the one before that, actually, where Kelly fouls Moylan, was probably more of a penalty than the one that was actually given.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you there.
And I've since seen the replay on the LOI TV, but even at the game, that was my thoughts. I thought the first one was a Stonewall penalty, to be honest. Take him out and Doc, tinted the glasses off for 2 seconds, it was a Stonewaller, but the second one I thought was extremely harsh. Now, I don't know if the referee, Paul McLaughlin, was looking to balance the books out. I don't know. But it was looking every bit after that. Obviously Farrell Dispatches 1-1. It was looking after that, every bit like it's going to be almost a carbon copy of the game in Talca, where Dundalk, had the points. It's going to be another draw. And I know Stephen O'Donnell afterwards was he was saying that was the reason behind some of the changes, the attacking nature of some of the changes. He was referencing himself to drawn too many games, Kieran, and that's just the way it is. And that game, which they drew in the first half or the first quarter of the season in Talca, suddenly they turned that into a win. And Keith Ward puts in an absolutely beautiful ball into the box, and yeah, it was fantastic. And John Martin, only on the pitch, he hasn't had a lot of action. He had a bit of an injury as well, but he hasn't had a lot of action, John Martin, and it's one of the best headers you're going to see. His bat's actually turned to goal, and he gets away from O'Driscoll, I think it is, and it's an absolutely amazing header, and a goal worthy of winning any game. And I think afterwards we weren't really focusing on how bad the game actually was in spells. Like, it was just it felt like a really big moment in the Dundalk season, and I think hopefully they can push on from that now.
Just the final result, St. Patrick's Athletic got a good result against Finn Harps. Finn Harps once again being dragged into that relegation mire. It's something that, even though the recruitment has been very positive this year for Ollie Horgan, once again, it's just very, very difficult in this Premier Division, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it just seems to be like a continuous thing with Finn Harps. And Ollie Horgan himself admits that, before every season, he's already in survival mode before a ball's kicked, it seems. So I think, obviously losing 2-0 to Pats, again, just talking Pats for a wee minute, I think, we spoke about Jimmy McGonigal, and with Derry, they're going a few games out ago, but Owen Doyle had a bit of a sticky patch as well, and he's popped up with, he's back on the goal trail now as well, and he was a big signing for Pats in the off-season from Bolton across the pond. So, he might kick on and Pats might kick on. But in terms of Finn Harps, I don't think they'd be too concerned just yet. I think they obviously always felt that they were going to be in a relegation scrap once again this season. Although I agree with you, I think they have recruited very well, and I think you have to go after Ollie Horgan, for his recruitment, and he seems to do it on a shoestring budget, and get some really good players in there. Big blow, obviously, with Dave Webster. I think
the news coming out today that he's out for the rest of the season. Yeah,
that's a massive blow for them. Because he's one of their experienced heads at the back there, and you got like McNamee, who's got that creative spark, and obviously Bastian Harry's come in there as well now. But Dave Webster is one of Finn Harp's key players, and that could be a massive blow. Well, it will be a massive blow, I think, for Finn Harp's season. And the only saving grace for Harps is, it doesn't look like UCD, are going to put up, like, they are putting up a fight, UCD, obviously, but like, you feel like in the summer months now, they could lose Colin Whelan, they could lose Liam Kerrigan, like, you know what I mean? And UCD haven't got the structure to like replace those players. That's just not the kind of club it is. It's a different sort of club. So I think Finn Harps would maybe be counting their blessings that UCD are in the Premier this season, and not say a Waterford, for argument's sake, like, who have a bit of backing behind them and can bring in players mid-season and can switch things around a bit the way UCD can. So you would have to say UCD would probably finish in the bottom position. It'll probably be between Drogheda United and Finn Harps for that 9th place, I'm guessing, at the minute.
If we can move on to the First Division, obviously, we've said this on the show, it's been so competitive this year, but if you're looking at the results, in your opinion, was the Ian Maher sacking, the departure, I don't want to say sacking, it's a bit of a harsh term, but the departure, was that a surprise to you?
It actually wasn't, because I'm actually in a group chat with a couple of Waterford fans, and it seemed to talk down now. Scoop. Well, I don't know about that now, but it seems that the consensus down there for the last number of weeks has been that Ian Morris, is already under a spot of pressure, and there's been a lot of there's been a lot of support, discontent, at the way Waterford have sort of started the season. Obviously, the way they got relegated last year was very unfortunate. I think they finished on over 40 points and managed to get relegated. I'm not sure if that's ever happened in the League of Ireland. To be honest, to finish with 40 odd points and go down it's unheard of. And obviously that was a massive blow. But Morris got the job obviously on the back of getting Shelbourne, out of the First Division last season as champions. I was actually more shocked when he got the sack from Shelbourne not that I want to use that word, Kieran, but
Yeah, I know.
I was more shocked when he got when he left Shells, because I think because Shell supporters who I also know were kind of surprised at that one. I wasn't overly surprised to see him go from Waterford. It just seems the feeling down there in the last few weeks has been, there's been a real negative sort of vibe down there at the moment. And I think everybody kind of expected Waterford to kind of walk the first division with their eyes closed, especially with some of the players they brought in and some of the players that they actually kept, that they managed to keep. You know what I mean, from last season's squad. You'd think they're going to walk the first division with their eyes closed, but it hasn't transpired that way. And they're sitting in fourth place at the minute with Longford above them. Where with a game in hand or a couple of games in hand, I think. So it's not been a good start to the season for the money that's been invested in the squad, and it's probably not a major surprise that he's gone. The only question is, and I say this about every manager that departs a club, Kieran, is like, I'm not sure why a club would let a manager go unless there was a ready-made replacement coming in to take his place. So I'm not sure what the options for Waterford are. I've heard Neil Fenn being mooted in some places. I'm not sure how that'll go down in Waterford. But I'm not sure what options are actually out there to take his place. Would Vinnie Perrott fancy the job? Who knows? Yeah. Could be a runner.
He had been muted for that job before Ian Morris got it. So his name is being banded around. We'll actually talk about another managerial slight appointment because of what newspaper reports have been saying this week. We'll talk about Athlone Town in just a couple of minutes. But another team that seems to be top of the pile, our old friends Cork City. We know them very well from our experience. They had a Cobh. They won the Cobh derby, so to speak. They did have the sweat for it. It went to 3-2. But Colin Heaney seems to just have them ticking at the moment, and it's not going to call it plain sailing, but they're definitely on their way.
Yeah, they're definitely in the running, Kieran. And Cork obviously have had a really rough couple of seasons after getting relegated. Where they haven't even been in the running to get promoted really in the last couple of seasons. So that's obviously Cork were like with Dundalk, were neck and neck for every honour in the League of Ireland not that long ago. So obviously things went really wrong down there. Well, it seems Colin Healy, they've got a coach now, a young progressive coach who seems to be bringing the identity back into the club. The crowds are amazing down in Turner's Cross, as there seems to be a real buzz again in Cork, and they're winning games, and they're top of the pile at the minute. And I think the Premier Division probably needs a strong team from Cork. Like, it needs a strong Cork team. And I think Colin Healy has to take a lot of credit for that, because he hasn't been able to bring in any big name players to that Cork team. Again, it's a shoestring budget, and they're top of the pile. And they actually had a slow enough start even this season. I think it was the first 2 or 3 games they didn't win, and I think a lot of the feeling down there was, it's going to be the same story again this season for Cork, and they're just going to be kind of mid-table in the first division. But they've fairly gone on a run now in the last month or so, and they're just a flyby. They're just a flyby top of the league at the minute, and the table doesn't lie after 10, 11 games, and they've only lost 1 match, and yeah, I think, and they've obviously scored. They've scored more goals than anybody as well, I think, in that league. They seem to have no trouble finding the net. So, and when Turner's Cross is in that sort of, when they have the crowd behind them at Turner's Cross, it's a very tough place for anyone to go, and even Premier Division teams wouldn't be fancying it. So, I think Cork are a really Cork have been I don't want to say they've been the surprise package, because they're a massive club, but I probably wasn't expecting them to be going this well early in the season. I was thinking maybe Galway, Waterford, so I probably wouldn't have put Cork down to be top after 11 matches.
Speaking of Galway, they're 3 points behind Cork at the moment. John Caulfield is really starting to get a team going there. And look, there's only going to be 1 team promoted at the end of the season. I think in some respects it's automatically promoted, mind you. They were disappointed. They had disappointment in the playoffs last year. Could that be the realistic way that we could see Premier Division football back in the West next year if they were the luck of the draw of the playoffs were to go their way?
Yeah, possibly. Galway again. It's unlike Cork. There's actually quite a bit of investment in Galway now. Obviously with the Comer Group, you've obviously taken full control of the club, and there's good investment in Galway. And Galway again, a bit like Cork, another club that needs, you want a Galway presence in the top flight in Irish football for more reasons than one. Galway, Cork, even Waterford. I think these kind of clubs need to be in the Premier. And that's no disrespect to maybe some other clubs who I haven't mentioned, but those clubs, I think in particular, they need strong. Like, there's so much potential with those clubs, and Galway is one of them. I've always felt Galway is a club with massive potential if it can be managed in the right way. I think in John Caulfield, they've got a very experienced manager who knows the League of Ireland inside out. Has won honours with Cork, obviously. I took Cork from kind of nowhere. Cork weren't doing much before John Caulfield came in.
Yeah.
So I think John Caulfield's probably building something there. But again, it's a slow process. That first division is as we know all too well, as the Dog supporters in the noughties, it's a very difficult league to get out of. Even when you have the financial backing, and I've likened this in the last couple of years to the wacky races at times. Like, you know what I mean? It just seems to be, there's no predicting it really. And I think this year, in fairness, it's slightly different in the sense that I think it's a very strong first division. Where you've got 4 clubs, I suppose, who would have had realistic ambitions of winning the division. And I'm saying that I think that's the top 4 at the minute. Galway, Cork, Waterford, and probably Longford as well. You could add in there. Have probably had ambitions to go up automatically as champions. So, at the very most, 2 of them are going to go up. So, and playoffs, as we all know, it's the first division teams in the last couple of years have actually had good records in the playoffs. Obviously, Shells got beaten by Longford, and obviously, UCD got one over Waterford last season as well. So the first division teams have actually got the better of the Premier sides in the playoffs in the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, so I was just going to cut in there. I didn't mean to, but it was just that I suppose winning momentum by winning those playoff matches, going in against a side that has just lost a lot of games, is probably a big mindset. Niall, I'm going to wrap up. We're going to look at the fixtures for this week. Just going into what is another very, very busy week, starting with the Premier Division. St Patrick's Athletic versus Derry City, absolutely massive match there. Loud derby. Dundalk versus Drogheda. Bohemians are playing UCD. Finn Harps are at home to Shelbourne, which is at 8 o'clock, and Sligo Rovers are playing Shamrock Rovers. What game sticks out there?
Yeah, I think, like you said, I think St. Pat's and Derry, is a massive game. It's going to be a massive test for Derry City's mettle now, after getting, as you said yourself, Kieran, the response of, beating UCD 7-1. Can they follow up now with obviously a much tougher fixture now at Richmond Park against St. Pat's, a team that's, with Dundalk and Sligo going to be challenging for Europe this season. Can't really ignore the Loud derby either. Dundalk and Drogheda, even though I'm wearing the wrong colours for that today, but
we'll say not.
We'll say not. No, I shouldn't have mentioned it, but I think but again, a bit like Derry, Dundalk will feel they got a bit of a response against Shelbourne last week, and I think Drogheda hasn't really clicked into gear for them in the way it did last year. You just feel Drogheda had a bit more mettle about them last season, and they struggled this season. Now, that being said, they beat Dundalk at Head Game Park earlier in the year, and that was, for Dundalk, that was probably one of 2 games where they really didn't perform. The other being St. Pat's, the 2 televised games, incidentally. Dundalk were the biggest letdowns for Dundalk, I think, this season so far, and they didn't perform that night in Drogheda, and maybe they want to get one over their Loud rivals. There's no better way to do it, because I think Dundalk, obviously, after beating Shells, the next 3 games are, Drogheda, Drogheda, UCD away, UCD. And then they got Bohemians at home. So there are 3 games where Stephen O'Donnell will be thinking there's at least 7 points maybe up for grabs there, and possibly 9. So not to put pressure on them, but that's that would be the ambition, I'm sure, in the Dundalk dressing room at the minute. For Drogheda, they need to have points on the board. Finn Harps, obviously, playing Finn Harps and Shells is an interesting one in its own right, because both teams, probably need the points. Shells don't want to be looking over their shoulders. So Finn Harps can get a result there, suddenly, Shells looking over their shoulder, you know what I mean? And they could be looking at a relegation scrap as well, or to avoid that playoff, basically. And then obviously, the battle of the Rovers, Shamrock Rovers and Sligo. Sligo is never an easy place to go, but, Shamrock Rovers seem to be developing a really good habit of sort of, digging out wins, like, you know, when they haven't played necessarily that well. And I think that's been, you know, even the last game I was in Tala on Easter Monday, and, you know, Rovers didn't play brilliantly, but they beat Dundalk 1-0. So that's just the way that's just typical of Rovers, and I think that's what champions do. Do you know what I mean? They slog out results when they're not playing well, and exactly, yeah, and that's the mark of champions, and that's why they've won the league the last 2 seasons, because they've managed to do that consistently. But it's going to be another big test for them now at the showgrounds against Sligo, because Sligo again challenging for Europe. You know, a good squad of players there, and, you know, Sligo is a tough place to go at the best times. So plenty of good fixtures to look forward to, you know, and I think that's been a feature of the league this season. It's just there's no game you can really predict, you know, with any real confidence. It's such a competitive league. I think you know, every game I've watched this season has just been so competitive. You know, even watching it, like I covered the Dundalk, so watching every single game's been absolutely, you know, to the wire. Basically, it's just been such a competitive league this year.
Looking at the First Division, Treaty United are playing Galway, so it's that's look, Marketsfield's very difficult to go to. Then you've got Cork City versus Longford. Longford held them to a 0-0 draw in their first game of the season. Bray Wanderers versus Cobh Ramblers, and then Athlone Town versus Wexford. Is there a game there that, you know, Cork have a tricky tie there? They're on their, you know, they have to play Gary Cronin's side. It's, you know, as we were just mentioned there, it's so competitive in the First Division.
It is. It's so competitive. Again, you know, like the Premier, and I think that's good for the league, and I think that's why you're seeing the crowds are up even in the First Division as well. You know, the attendance has been absolutely amazing across both divisions, this season. And but again, yeah, the standout game there is probably Longford versus Cork. I think at Turner's Cross. I think you know, Longford have a couple of games in hand, and, you know, they're kind of quietly going about their business, you know, at the moment. After a few changes in the off season, like, you know, obviously you got relegated last year in the Premier, didn't put up as much of a fight as they would have hoped, I think, in the Premier last season. It was disappointing on their end, but they might come back stronger. And, you know, they've been going.
Still managed to beat us, though, Niall.
I don't think that was that wouldn't have taken much last season to get on. To be fair, you know, we won't talk about those games. But I think. But Longford, you know, they've been going about their business really quietly in the First Division and kind of unnoticed. And yet they could find themselves in a really strong position if they beat Cork and, you know, win a couple of those games in hand. They could be looking at the top position in the table. So, yeah, it's all to play for.
Now, before I go with my quick fire questions, I'll ask you just at the end. There's talk this week in the media that Athlone Town are currently looking for a manager because Martin Russell has been relieved of his duties. Kieran Kilduff, who is very well known to not only just us, but as Dundalk fans, and as Dundalk reporters, but also for the League of Ireland in general, he's turned out to be a front runner. But what else is also is that if the former Cork City player, Carl Shepherd, has also been put in for as a name to be in the running. In a way, I'm kind of delighted because you've got two former League of Ireland kind of stars going to cut their teeth into the First Division. But do you think that that's kind of something that we're going to see more of? These kind of, I'm not going to call them retired stars, but players who have played at a very high level, because you tend to forget both of them have played in the Europa League. Kieran Kilduff has played twice, if I'm not mistaken. Like, they've won League of Ireland medals, they've won FAI Cups. These guys have won it all, and now they're going to bring that kind of experience into a club like Athlone, which has a plethora of potential for a club. Never mind in the First Division, but as a whole. Yeah,
Athlone again. You know, another club that's historically been strong in the League of Ireland. You go back to the Turk O'Connor days in the early '80s. Athlone were always challenging for titles and honours, you know, and they've been a sleeping giant, I suppose, at the risk of, you know, getting Damien Duff on the line here, you know, but they have been like, I think, you know, it's a great opportunity for Kieran Kilduff or, you know, Carl Shepherd to cut their teeth at a club of the stature of Athlone. And obviously it's going to be it's going to be a tremendously difficult job for whoever gets it. You know, it's obviously Athlone are a big club, but they haven't really achieved anything in the last number of years. They've had a barren few decades, I suppose. And obviously they got back in the Premier there just, you know, not 7 or 8 years ago. They were back in the Premier, and, you know, were unlucky not to stay up that season, I think, under Keith Long. So I think, like, you know, I'd like to see, like, I don't know Carl Shepard personally, so I can't really comment on it, but I've been lucky enough to meet Kieran Kilduff, you know, numerous times, interviews and stuff like that, and, you know, he's a really, you know, decent fella, and, you know, I'd like to see him get a chance at the job, but it's going to be a tough one for whoever gets it, because at loan, you know, there's not a lot of investment in the club at the minute. They are a club with potential. A lot of young players, though, Kieran, like you said, and I think, you know, someone of the stature of Kieran Kilduff or Carl Shepard coming in, you know, it will instantly lift a dressing room, because you're talking to guys who've, like, as you said, have won everything in the League of Ireland football and have played big European matches, and, you know, will be able to, you know, transfer that experience onto a much younger group of players, and, you know, that's the name of the game, as opposed to management. And, you know, the two boys, you know, the two young coaches, you know, and it's a great chance for either one of them now to cut their teeth in League of Ireland management.
Right, quick fire question. Surprise package of the season.
Surprise package of the season. Yeah, that's a great one. I'm not too. Like, I don't think there's been too many surprises, to be fair, at the minute. Certainly in the Premier Division. Like, I think when you look at the league table at the moment, I think the teams are sort of where you nearly expect them to be at this point. You know, I think, but in the first division, like I mentioned, you know, Cork, you know, being top of the first division, I think probably deserves a mention. I probably wouldn't have called that. Certainly after 3 weeks when they hadn't won a game, I don't think. So I had to probably go with Cork City. If we're including both divisions, that is.
Yeah. Oh no, we're including both divisions in this.
Yeah. Premier, I haven't seen much surprise at the minute.
No. Biggest disappointment.
Biggest disappointment.
Yeah, I had to do it.
I think, you know, I think Shelbourne and Bohemians will be, you know, won't be too pleased about where like when you think, when we've already referenced, you know, Shelbourne, you know, letting Ian Morris kind of go on the back of getting promoted and bringing in, you know, Damien Duff, who is, you know, a massive name, obviously, in Irish football and world football, actually. But I don't know if, like, with Ian Morris managing Shelbourne, would there be much of a difference where they are in the league at the minute? You know, I still think they would have been ahead of Finn Harps and UCD. So I'm not sure it's made too much of a difference. Bringing Duff in at the minute, they're third bottom in the table. And, you know, obviously he gets sent off on Friday, which is well documented now, his first red card in football, I'm led to believe, like, which I didn't know. But I'd say Shelbourne have been quite disappointing. The way they didn't play, like, their style of football. I get why teams do it, Kieran, sometimes, and, you know, when you're away from home, you have to set up like that sometimes. But it was an appallingly bad game in the first half in Oriel, and I think a lot of that was down to Shell's approach. Like, and that's no disrespect to the approach they took. They did what they felt they had to do. Bohemians, you know, and they're a disappointing time for them. They've been booed off a few times, which you never like to see. I still think that's extremely harsh. And there's even been a few whispers of, you know, Keith Long possibly being under pressure, which is mind-boggling, really. Yeah, it's mind-boggling, really, because I think people need to get their heads out of the sand sometimes and realise, you know, the kind of budget you're working with there. It's the same with the Dundalk as well, like, you know, and, you know, there was people, you know, voicing discontent after a few draws for Dundalk, and then I'm constantly reminding people, and you're the same as yourself, Kieran, you're able to remember, you know, a time before 2013 when Stephen Kenny wasn't there, like Dundalk existed before then, you know. So I think sometimes, but yeah, I'd say I'd go with Shelbourne as being the biggest disappointment so far. I think you know, I would have thought they might have been challenging a bit more at the minute, maybe a bit higher up the table.
Who's going to win the FAI Cup? Give me a club. Don't go into explanation. Just give me the club.
Dundalk.
Who's going to win the league? Shamrock Rovers, Derry City, Dundalk. Who may it be?
Derry City will win the league this year.
First division.
First division. I'm still. I know Cork have started brilliantly, but I'm going to actually go with Galway United to win the first division.
Oh, there's a big call. Niall, listen, thanks very much. You've been absolutely fantastic, and we hope to have you maybe on again near the end of the year. We'll have another chat then.
No problem, Kieran. Pleasure. Thanks very much for having me.
No problem. And that's our lot for this week. I want to thank our guests this evening, Oisin Harlain and Niall Newberry of the Dundalk Democrat. We'll be back next week for another episode. Wherever you're going in the League of Ireland this weekend, make sure that you enjoy it. Take care. God bless. And I'll see you soon.